Imagine if you clone dogs, speak with psychics, defend people's rights to sell their own organs, and carry a chainsaw around. Well, if in Argentina you could become president. Of course, we're talking about Javier Milei, a far right libertarian economist who has outperformed expectations in the country's presidential primaries and who many believe could be the next president of Argentina, one of Latin America's biggest economies. My name is Gustavo Ribeiro. I'm editor in chief of the Brazilian Report, and this is LATAM This Week. As we always do for all things Argentina, I'm joined this week by Ignacio Portes, the Brazilian Report's Latin America editor and Buenos Aires correspondent, and our contrarian for all matters football, right? Ignacio, can you tell us a little bit about Javier Milei? Because I don't think at this point we can say that he has come out of nowhere, because he has already been around the block for a few years. But still, nobody expected him to perform as well as he did in August, when Argentina had this mandatory presidential primaries that usually function as a sort of highly accurate predictor of the first round results for the presidential election.
Right. Yes. Milei has been around for a couple of years, and it's not like if the polls were giving him 5% and he got 30. The polls were giving him 20% and he got 30. So he didn't come out of nowhere, but it was a surprise that everyone had him in third place in an election that is relatively tight for the three at the top. We have it's become commonplace to say we have a 3/3 election, an election of 3/3, in which Milei got 30%, the Peronist candidates got something like 28 point something, and the anti-Peronism the center right got 27%. So it's very tight at the top. But Milei did take a slim lead, which is what no one really predicted in the days before the election. People are still trying to understand why. Some people say that the topics that were debated in the last few days before the election favored Milei because there were some high-profile crimes in districts controlled by the other two parties, and he's a tough-on-crime candidate. But generally, I think that the Buenos Aires establishment failed to see that outside of Buenos Aires, he was bigger. He performed much better in the provinces. In Buenos Aires, he indeed came third, both in the province and in the capital. He came third, but he completely outperformed expectations the farther away from Buenos Aires you go. So maybe there was a bit of a failing to regionally poll well that explained the surprise. But yes, as you say, he didn't come out of nowhere. He has been very popular on Argentine TV. And I think he has been, maybe what has not been accurately seen is how popular he's been on social media. This has been very discussed after the election too. He has been a viral TikTok phenomenon. Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the thing about missing out how this guy is performing on social media is something that happened in the US in 2016, then it happened in Brazil in 2018, and somehow we see political elites failing to learn from what happens in countries that might have a lot of differences between their countries and these other political places, but that share a lot of similarities as well.
Yeah, I agree. It was very similar in that sense to Bolsonaro and Trump and Brexit and like a lot of similar stuff around the globe. In that, I mean, when Bolsonaro rose in Brazil, many people were surprised that he won, and it did seem similar at the time to me to Trump. And I said, okay, maybe this guy could win because Trump won, right? But when this happened in Argentina, I was the surprised one because when you're inside it, you don't see it. I think it's harder to like from outside you see the similarities, and from inside you get caught in the narratives of what people are telling. But indeed, it surprised. I think maybe it even surprised Milei how good he did. Um, but
And so, one question, because I think Millet is such a unique character, and it's very easy to turn him into a caricature. And I did that in our intro just as a provocation. But I wanted to ask you, what does he stand for? Because he has some ideas that are really out there. So, what does he stand for, and why are are his ideas resonating with the Argentinian average voter?
yeah, he's definitely a character. That is not. I mean, you can exaggerate it in some ways, but he is very much of a character. I think, like if you compare it to Trump, Trump was a very successful businessman that sometimes played to the crowd in some ways. He's a very he acted out in some ways, but Milei is a bit out there in many ways. He is a very true believer in what he says. I think he sounds very authentic to many people, and that is very valuable on the age of social media, to not look fake, that people think that you believe what you're saying, that you are that you're not trying to play them in some way. But he is a libertarian economist at heart. He is very ideological in that way. He explains most of what's around him in terms of the free markets, of failures caused by the state. So when he sees something wrong, he immediately looks, okay, where is the state screwing this up somehow? And how can the market solve it? He does that for every problem. He is a true believer, like a religious libertarian. And that's why all these stories about selling organs come out, which are real. They're not fake. He has said, following Murray Rothbard and other economists, he doesn't say it as much now because his advisors have told him this is a bad topic, but he does believe it. It would be better to have a free market of organs than having the state administrate that. And if you sold a kidney to someone that needs it and he pays well, that would be a fair exchange, because it's non-violent, it's not coercive, and this is libertarian thought. That any agreement between two people that is free and non-coercive is fine, and it doesn't take into account power differences or any dynamics that could start if you start doing that, or the fact that simply historically, even in the most capitalist societies around the world, nowhere in history has organ been up for commerce. But this is a fringe belief that it won't happen, of course. But this way of thought will be applied if he's in power with the limits of
So,
reality.
does he propose for Argentina? So you have a country with inflation over 100%, where just people have to spend as much as they can, as quickly as they can, otherwise their money will just lose value. We have recent numbers saying that 40% of the Argentinian population is living below the poverty threshold. So is it just that Argentinians are kind of desperate with the current economic situation, and everything that represents major change from what is the establishment is welcome? Or does Milei's specific proposals for the country are steering parts of the electorate? Like, he wants to shrink the state, he wants to dollarize the economy. I mean, how do you see that Milei effect on voters?
A bit of both. There is a bit of that. Just vote for the angry guy on TV. He represents how I feel, and he says burn it all down. Sure, there's a little bit of that, but he has, I think, correctly or pointed to something that is a real problem, and a real culprit of the problem, which is Argentina's central bank, which has been disastrous for decades. Argentina has been a country with out of control inflation for throughout much of the 20th century and the 21st. So the villain that he's identifying it makes perfect sense. If you're and the explanation that he has an explanation for the crisis, which is an alternative explanation to what politicians are usually giving. There's been a lot in the last 20 years of blaming inflation on companies, on multinationals, on some kind of bogeyman, and not any look at the state, on the giant debt schemes that the central bank creates, on the profligate spending by the treasury, or the typical stuff that Argentina does to create this massive inflation crisis that we have. And Milei has put his finger on that. He has said the central bank, the central bank, the central bank. The chainsaw means cutting public spending, so he gets he is getting to something real there. His solution is much more questionable, and we can go to that later maybe. But he says, okay, we have to change what we have to dollarization, and use the US dollar as a currency, which is something that very few countries have tried, but most importantly, which Argentina doesn't have the money to do it, because you to dollarize this, maybe I don't want to get too technical, but you have to replace all the circulating pesos, which are a lot, for US dollars, which Argentina doesn't have at all. So Milei is proposing to do that, and Argentina doesn't really have the money to do that at all. It would have to take massive loans to do it, which Argentina, no one wants to loan money to Argentina right now, obviously, because it's already in its bonds are trading at default prices. The IMF loan is unpayable, and so on. So the solution he's proposing is completely unrealistic in many ways, and Wall Street is not believing in that solution, and that is why markets tanked partly. I mean, but it's why one of the reasons that market did not respond well to the most pro-market candidate imaginable after he won the election. You would have expected that generally markets prefer a pro-market candidate, and they haven't in Argentina, because when Milei and his representatives went to the US to sell their plan and to ask for money to do his dollarization, the bankers and the funds that he talked to said, I don't know if this makes a lot of sense, loaning you millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to do this plan that I don't know if it will work. But it sounds attractive and sounds interesting to people reading a soundbite, listening to a soundbite on TV or on TikTok or on wherever it is, to say Argentina will have dollars instead of pesos, because already everyone saves in dollars in Argentina. The saving in pesos is the most
it's impossible to walk on the street. It's impossible to walk on the streets and cross 2 or 3 roads without someone offering you to buy or sell dollars, right?
Right. You do the small everyday transactions in pesos for sure. You buy coffee with pesos because, but you pay your taxes in pesos, most importantly. But for the big ones, like from a car and upward for an apartment, and it's dollars, because it doesn't even make sense, the number. It's millions and millions and millions of pesos for whatever, and changing every day. No one does that, and it's impossible to live like that. So Argentina thinks in dollars already for the big things, and so Milei is proposing that something that sounds instinctively that it makes some sense. It also reminds people of the 90s, when 1 peso was worth $1 due to the convertibility, the peg that Argentina established. But Argentina had hyperinflation before that, as most of Latin America did in 89, 90. And hyperinflation destroyed the value of the pesos that were circulating completely, and that allowed to do the convertibility, because you needed very few dollars to replace the pesos that were in circulation. And we haven't had hyperinflation, really. We have very high inflation, but not thousands and thousands and thousands of points of inflation per year, which is what you need to do a dollarization when you don't have dollars. So he is pointing to something real, definitely. The inflation crisis is what worries everyone. It's the number one concern. The second one is crime, as I said. But the solutions are very much questionable, and that's where there's so much uncertainty right now in the country and in everyone thinking about the country.
Now, I want to move on and talk a little bit about Milei's competition, who is he's facing. Before we do that, I just want to reach out to our viewers and ask them to support the Brazilian Report. We are an independent organization and we live off subscriptions. So you can go to Brazilian.report/subscribe. We have different membership tiers. One of them will fit your needs and will fit your budget. and we cover Brazil and Latin America extensively. And for that, we have won or been shortlisted for many journalism awards. If you have already subscribed to the Brazilian Report, then we invite you to go the extra mile, and you can flash the QR code on the bottom right end of your screen and actually donate a cup of coffee to one of our journalists. God knows journalists are fueled by coffee. And we also have a few membership programs there, where you can get exclusive content on Brazilian culture. You can see how we do our journalism and get some behind the scenes content. So go to buymeacoffee.com/Brazilian report. Now, Nacho, going back to the Argentinian election, so you said this is a three-horse race. You have Milei, you have the Peronists, and you have the anti-Peronists. So who is representing, who has taken up the mantle of Peronism, which is this sort of ubiquitous political force in Argentina?
Yeah, Peronism has been the main, the center of Argentinian politics for 70, 80 years since its appearance in the national stage in 1945. And all politics has oriented around that. And Milei really has the potential to change that, which is why this election could be so big, because he is introducing a third factor into play that could maybe turn Argentina into a more traditional left versus right country. Argentina has been very hard to understand for foreigners for a long of time because they cannot fit it into traditional left or right categories. But maybe Milei does that, or and turns it into something more similar to what we're seeing in all the world. But for now, what we have is three parties.
And especially Ignacio, because Peronism is Peronism left wing, is Peronism right wing, and the answer is yes to both, right?
Yes, it has been both. It has been everything and nothing, and many times in Argentina. But it's a party that has adapted to the times, and we are seeing it adapt right now in real time. Maybe a bit too slow for what it needed to do, and Milei really outpaced them and went much more right than everyone. And in a country that was already shifting right, Peronism maybe took its time to adapt to the times this time around, as opposed to in the 1990s, in which it made a turn to the right with no guilt at all and ruled the country again from the right after years in which it was more left. Now we are seeing a turn to the center, let's say, with Sergio Massa, the economy minister, which is a very pragmatic politician who is now the presidential candidate for Peronism, with the complete approval of Cristina Kirchner, who has been representing the more left-wing faction of the country, of the party. She has now. She's a semi-retired figure now that just speaks every now and then to say that, okay, Massa is the best we have right now. You should vote for him. I still have my ideals, but you should vote for this guy. It's the best we have at the moment. And they have a clear political alliance. And Massa is trying to adapt his message to the right-wing turn that Argentina is having, with a more tough on crime message, with trying to be friendly with markets and promising some kind of more market-friendly turn. He has been cutting some taxes, which is a strange thing in Argentina in this campaign. He has done it. So he's trying to show that he can be different while still being friends with Cristina, while still taking the Cristina vote. But he has the big problem that he's the economy minister in a country whose economy is collapsing. So he's very vulnerable there. It's very hard for him to defend himself from the simple fact that inflation is 130% and going up. And there was a devaluation a month ago, and all the economic variables are out of control. He's just juggling balls in the air to try to make sure that things don't explode before the election. But and Peronism had its lowest vote total in history. In the primaries, it got just below 30%, which is low for Peronism. But it's also true that the traditionally anti-Peronist party also had a very low vote count at also 28%, 28 versus 27 for Peronism. That's a more of a center-right coalition that represents more of the upper classes of Argentina. Milei, I think, represents more of a right-wing vote, but more popular vote of people that are outside Buenos Aires, as I said, and with a less university educated and win a different agenda in some ways to the center right vote that goes to the typical anti-Peronist front. So those two parties are struggling to get into the runoff versus Milei, although anything can happen really, because as we said, it's a very tight race. But the big question now is whether Sergio Massa or Patricia Bullrich, which was the more right-wing alternative in the center-right primary, makes it to the runoff if we have a runoff at all, because it's been a race full of surprises in a month or so.
And Nacho, like you said, so we have three candidates with the chance of winning. One of them is more to the center left. One is a right wing person, like a very right wing person, and the other one is
also a very right
very far to the right.
Yes.
Do you yeah, exactly. Do you think that it is probable or possible that we would have a runoff stage featuring the far right and the right wing? Or do you think that Peronism, despite its struggles, despite the economy being in shambles, remains a force to be reckoned with, at least to qualify for the runoff? Because it would be a seismic event if you have right
Yes.
versus far right.
Yes, definitely. The consensus right now is that it's going to be Milei versus Massa. But the polls have been wrong, very wrong, always in Argentina. We did a story that 2 days before the election, which said polls are always wrong in Argentina. And they were wrong again. You just have to guess in which sense they're going to get it wrong. But they got it wrong, and they could get it wrong again easily. So because Massa has the economy against him, that's a really big factor. Milei has it's easy now for him to do the opposite, to do to the center right or to the right, because it's hard to call Patricia Bullrich center right really, to just say, look, for a long time you said that you were the pragmatic vote, and that we were just some crazy extremists that divided the right. But now we came first. So you are the spoiler, and we are the pragmatic vote, Milei can say to Patricia Bullrich voters. And so you should vote for us, because we are the pragmatic way to beat Kirchner. We are what you said you were. And in some people, I think that's going to work, that some right-wing voters are going to say, okay, Milei is the one with most chances of beating Kirchnerism and Peronism and all we hate. Massa and Milei, in a way, are polarizing. They know that it's convenient for them to polarize between each other and just ignore Bullrich and just to get to the next stage of the runoff. And they're doing a bit of that. They're discussing with each other and trying to say that Bullrich doesn't matter anymore, to make it to the next phase. And Bullrich is trying to stay relevant somehow. She does look a bit desperate in her campaign. She's running some very populist TV ads, trying to imitate Milei in ways that sound forced, really. They did a crazy TV ad now that with a giant jail, Bukele-style jail, but the ad says that they're going to call the jail Cristina Kirchner, which is crazy. It's like something you would see in the parodic film about banana republics.
They're lampooning themselves.
Yes. I mean, something completely preposterous, anti-republic. They always pride themselves in saying we're Republican, we respect institutions, but now they're saying in a TV ad that we're going to build a jail with the name of our political opponent, which we want to put in jail. So they are really forcing the issues, trying to find populist ways to communicate, trying to imitate Milei in some ways, and failing. And it feels a bit cringy, which is the worst thing you can do in the internet. So right now it does seem like it's gonna be Milei versus Massa, but Massa has the economy against him, so everything is possible.
Yes, and the thing about what you said about Patricia Bullrich, and we saw this here in Brazil, is that when the right wing tries to emulate the far right, they put themselves in a position where they become too radical for moderate voters, but not radical enough for radical voters. So they are in this sort of limbo where they actually narrow their chances of winning.
Yes.
But Nacho, let's before we wrap this up, let's talk about um, from between here and next month when the elections will take place. What are the dynamics of the race? What are the how do you see this final stretch of the campaign playing out?
Well, there's not a lot of. We have really 3 weeks left, 3 weeks and a little bit for the vote, for the first round vote, let's say, and then another 3 weeks for the hypothetical runoff. You need 40% of votes plus 10% difference to avoid a runoff, which is not completely impossible for Milei to get 40. But I think right now the base scenario is no runoff, but everything's possible. The dynamic is, I mean, Milei is starting to get attacked. That's the new thing. Milei was ignored, really, in the mainstream press, at least. He was very popular on social media and so on, and that was a bit underestimated, I think, by analysts. And what we're seeing now is that the TV channels, especially the Macri-friendly TV channel, the Bullrich-friendly TV channels, the center-right, is attacking Milei a lot. And really everyone is attacking them. We wrote a story on how for some time everyone boosted his image for different reasons, because Peronism thought it would help divide the right-wing vote. Macri thought it will help move his party to the right, which he wanted to defeat his centrist internal opposition. So everyone kind of let Milei rise, and now they're really seeing him as a threat. The center right can really disappear or split. It can go into complete crisis if Milei wins. It really is a coalition in risk of disappearance if they finish third, as pollsters are saying. And so everyone is attacking him, and they're going after the vulnerable points that were just dismissed as just some crazy guy talking. The dollarization is being discussed front and center. Bullrich has put his economists at the center. Bullrich's economists are going to TV all the time to explain why dollarization doesn't make sense. And Peronism is attacking Milei's personality a lot, how he's crazy, how he's extreme, how he wants to close universities. They're playing every video that they can find of him in the last 5-6 years, saying crazy stuff about closing universities, or stuff about the pandemic, or stuff about doing a free market, of the craziest thing where you can think of a free market. Speaking about his dog, speaking about whatever, his girlfriends, whatever. How low attacks can go in an election cycle. They're talking about his private life and so on. And so, Milei is really the focus now and the center of attention, and he's not used to that. So and he's not a strong personality that can take it so easily. He's not a Trump, so he's hiding a little bit in the last few days. He's not responding to. He's on the defensive right now. He knows he can win. He doesn't want to screw it saying something stupid. But there are the presidential debates coming up. He won't be able to hide from that. This Sunday and the next Sunday, that's gonna be the big stage. And I think both Bullrich and Massa will want to make him take a false step on air, say something, make him look stupid, make him look extremist, make him say that whatever, he's gonna privatize schools, or he's going to whatever it is, to show that his public spending promises are impossible to do just by cutting the salaries of senators, and that to really cut 15% of GDP in spending, you have to actually cut social welfare programs and so on, which Milei has said he doesn't want to. But it's hard to make those two things compatible. So he will get attacked a lot. He is getting attacked a lot, and he will have to show poise and competence and look presidential, really, in the coming weeks to keep what is now, in many ways, his race to lose. That's I think the dynamic that we're going to see.
Nacho, I think we have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Before we go, I have to ask you the most important question. Palmeiras will play Boca Juniors tonight in Buenos Aires. I know you're not that huge fan outside of the Argentinian football team, but will you be a homer and support Boca Juniors, or will you join the good guys and support Palmeiras?
No, I will be supporting Boca. Sorry about that. I think Palmeiras is the favorite in some senses, but Boca is very good in the Libertadores and has always beat Palmeiras in the Libertadores, like historically. So be careful that Boca could sneak it out on penalties or something like that.
Wow. We're going to see. I hope Palmeiras wins at least 1-0 tonight, and then wrap this up next week. But Nacho, thank you very much. And we are sure to have you back to discuss the Argentinian elections. Could be one of the most consequential elections in the past few decades. Nacho, thank you very much. And I thank everyone who watched the show with us. And keep up with Brazil and Latin America on Brazilian.report. You can subscribe to any of our membership tiers and get exclusive content every single day on your inbox. Nacho, muchas gracias.
Thank you, Gustavo. Bye-bye.